This is CBC Vancouver News.
It's about learning and understanding and creating justice for Indigenous people.
Facing hard truths on National Truth and Reconciliation Day.
A lot of them went through what we went through in residential school. And it's a very painful thing to go through.
What this day symbolizes to residential school survivors, their families, and the generations to come. In the Kootenays,
every time I get an opportunity to tell one of our stories in this building, it's a victory.
a building that was once a residential school,
institution that was once used in an attempted cultural genocide,
is now an international school teaching students about the darkest chapters of Canadian history. And
I just feel so sad and very compassionate.
It's recognizing my privilege as a white settler.
What it means to me is like a change.
How the calls to action go beyond a slogan and wearing an orange shirt for a day. Good evening, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Well, today is a day of hurt for some, healing for others, and reflection for many. It's National Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. It's a day to honor residential school survivors and acknowledge the damage caused to generations of Indigenous people. Our Michelle Morton attended various gatherings in Vancouver today, hearing from survivors and their families about what this day means to them.
Dozens of people came together Saturday to honor those forced to attend residential schools and to stand with their descendants.
We were pretty close to extinction.
At Grandview Park, community members gathered to listen to stories from survivors, like Esther Calder. She says she went to St. George's Indian Residential School in Lytton in the 1960s. And to see everyone together today, she calls it a true blessing.
To be able to see all these people, because a lot of them went through what we went through in residential school. And it's a very painful thing to go through.
In 2021, the federal government designated September 30th a national holiday, as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommended in its 94 calls to action.
We need to stand up for Indigenous people. It's not just wearing an orange shirt. It's about learning and understanding and creating justice for Indigenous people.
National Truth and Reconciliation Day events are happening all across the province. It's an important and meaningful day for Indigenous people to remember and to honor survivors and children who didn't make it home from residential schools. For those gathering, it's also about creating a safe space to grieve and to heal, and that's through songs, drumming, and dancing. At Vancouver's Trout Lake Community Centre, hundreds of people also gather to support Indigenous families. Deborah Bainan says she lost her language and culture when she attended the residential school in Port Alberni, and by her side is her husband and her grandson.
I really love that he's here. He's part of that support system for me.
This little guy here, he's third generation. They say that it's going to take 7 generations to get rid of a lot of the trauma that's happened to us. But I think it's probably going to be longer, because each succeeding generation that doesn't get the help that they need.
For some, healing has begun, but for others, there's still a long way to go. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
In Victoria, upwards of 10,000 people gathered for a powwow held by the Songhees First Nation.
My hope is that people don't just think that coming to commemorate residential school survivors is about one day. It's about recognizing that we need to talk about this constantly.
They hope their gathering will resonate throughout the year, not just today, and help move forward along the path towards reconciliation. It wasn't just in BC either. Events took place right across Canada today to confront the shame of residential schools. The CBC's Marina Von Stackelberg is in Ottawa with more from Parliament Hill.
The names of Indigenous children, one after another, on a banner stretching on and on. They never returned home from residential school. Through records, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation has identified more than 4,000 children who died.
The NCTR continues to work with churches, governments, and others so we can finally access the 23 million records that were not released to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. We know more children will be found and their names will be added.
Honoring that ongoing fight led by survivors to identify more of those missing children.
I am here and not with my mother, but I was with her when she identified dozens of unidentified children in photographs at the Roman Catholic Archives.
Those who survived still feel the legacy of having their language and culture taken away from them, suffering widespread abuse.
Today we remember and we must talk about what happened to those tens of thousands of Indigenous children, including my parents, subjugated, humiliated, stripped of love and care, state and church-sanctioned violations against them that we all must now live with.
And today, a recognition of survivors and their families that fought for decades to have Canada's dark past brought to light.
We honor all those who broke down those barriers to education, to teach our true history of Indigenous peoples that was erased for generations.
And honoring those who helped survivors and their families heal and continue to heal from trauma.
I would encourage us to double our efforts in advancing reconciliation. How? Where there's hatred, let us sow love.
Without love, there's no healing. And what each and every one of our survivors pray for as we say this prayer from our heart today, let us show that love to the survivors. And we thank the Creator for blessing us with such a beautiful day.
Marina Von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, this coverage can be upsetting and stir up painful feelings or memories. If you or someone you care about is looking for support, you can reach the 24-hour National Residential School Crisis Line at 1-866-925-4419. In honor of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, people across the province and, yes, around the country are also wearing orange.
It means to me is like a change. So, you know, I got a lot of forgiveness I got to do because I'm a 60 scoop. I was taken away at 7 days old.
To support all of the Indigenous children who are not treated very well, and we have to remember to take care of all our children, especially the ones most vulnerable.
It's recognizing my privilege as a white settler, European heritage, and that, you know, I'm existing and working on land that's unceded territories.
Just feel so sad and very compassionate about supporting them in any way I can.
In the Kootenays, the First Nations community of Aka marked the day with a walk, and it also marks the beginning of a partnership that will see international students living and learning within the community. As our Corey Bullock explains, it's being held up as a celebration of culture.
A dark past has now become a beacon of hope for the community of Akum.
Every time I get an opportunity to tell one of our stories in this building, it's a victory.
St. Eugene Mission operated as a residential school until 1970. Today, it's an award-winning resort owned by 4 Tanaha bands and the Shuswap Indian Band.
I think we all know across Canada the stories of residential school, and I think most people are very familiar with that #1 rule: you do not speak your own language. Like, that was the #1 rule in all of these schools.
Now it's a welcoming place of learning where the Tanaha language is celebrated.
Institution that was once used in an attempted cultural genocide is now a vehicle for students from around the world to learn Tanaka history, Tanaka language, Tanaka culture.
The community of Akum gathered today to recognize Orange Shirt Day, and the first cohort of students from Purcell Collegiate International School were welcomed.
And so once these students go home, you know, they're going to be returning home maybe with an orange shirt, you know, from Orange Shirt Day, and the message that's on that shirt, and having family ask about that.
Acum and Purcell Collegiate signed a memorandum of understanding in 2021, and both parties say that the partnership is a step toward reconciliation.
To have now a school where the children have amazing experience, good experiences, like almost full circles.
Students will learn the BC curriculum with a focus on Indigenous ways of knowing and First Peoples principles of learning. They'll be immersed in Ktunaxa culture. I want to make sure that the students, when they come here, get an opportunity to be in relationship with Akamascapikups and all living things, not just the human beings that are here, but all living things that are here. But for today, it's an opportunity to recognize the impact of the residential school system. And for Acum, Pierre says it's a celebration of resilience. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
In the Okanagan, members of the RCMP teamed up with Indigenous youth for a journey of reconciliation. Our Brady Strachan is there and tells us the collective hope is that the trip helps establish a brighter future.
Let's go. It takes many hands and arms to lift a large white canoe off a trailer. Well done. Yeah. These West Bank First Nation teens are paired up with RCMP officers for a paddling journey across Okanagan Lake.
I guess for me, it's seeing the elders, because they helped us make our drums, they helped us make our drum bags. Like, watch them, see us put it into use, and for a good cause.
For Constable Mike Della Palera, the journey is an important one. He says reconciliation is something he's committed to as a member of the RCMP.
I grew up in the Yukon Territory. Most of my friends when I was a child were taken away and put into residential homes during the winter months while their parents went out onto the land. I didn't understand any of that kind of stuff. So this is everyday learning about our past and working forward to a positive future.
He hopes events like this will help carve out better relationships for the RCMP with Indigenous people.
I had to deal with that when I was growing up as a kid, and now I understand what's going on, so we can't allow that to happen anymore.
Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
And the David Suzuki Foundation has announced a new project called the National Healing Forest Initiative. It's aimed at building understanding around the findings of the Truth and Reconciliation report through green spaces. To start with, the group will be removing invasive species as a symbolic step towards reconciliation.
Most of those invasive plants, like English ivy, came with colonization. So by taking out those invasive plants, we're actually restoring the land and also building reconciliation. And then we plant back the native plants that were original to that area to restore that space. Then we can continue to develop a better relationship with the First Peoples.
The foundation says there are currently 16 established healing forests in Canada, and they'll support 33 additional initiatives this year. 5 of them will be in BC. Well, centuries-old treaty documents remain under strict government custody. But recently, CBC News was given rare access. Our Brett Forrester takes a trip to the Library and Archives Canada Preservation Centre.
This is where the treaties rest.
And so this is the vault.
In the bowels of a government preservation center in a secure vault amid rows of priceless artwork and historic treasures, the sacred agreements between First Nations and the Crown lie locked away.
So this is where the treaties would be stored?
Yes, this is where the treaty is stored.
For Manice Young, treaty preservation is a hands-on affair. The Library and Archives Canada official carts this one from the cool, climate-controlled vault through the winding concrete of the department's Gatineau, Quebec facility up to a sunny lab on the upper floor.
So what we have here, it's the James Bay Treaty number 9. It's the amendments of the Treaty 9, or adhesions.
She traces the fine craftsmanship of this adhesion to Treaty 9 in Ontario, highlighting its ornate gold tooling, black goat leather binding, and sturdy parchment pages.
With our job in conservation, we're always finding the balance between access, which is what we're doing now, but also the long-term preservation. And Treaty 11...
That's the delicate dance now on display. While the public can see these documents on request, few get this close. And while sending them to visit their home First Nations is cumbersome, it does happen, says Young.
A lot of people get very emotional as well because these are their ancestors. It's a very big connection to the past.
That's the case for lawyer and former Couchiching First Nation chief Sarah Mainville. She got the chance to see the original Treaty 3 while on loan to the First Nations in that territory in Western Ontario and Manitoba.
It's meaningful to see the document.
And something communities shouldn't have to wait another century and a half to see again, she adds.
The Anishinaabe should have more regular visits with these documents. It shouldn't take 150th anniversary.
It's easy to feel the power in that presence. Early treaties looked like this. The Huron Tract Purchase of 1827. It opened up a swath of southern Ontario to European settlement, yet it looks like it was scrawled hastily across this single piece of now faded parchment. Compare that with these copies of Treaty 11 or the Williams Treaties, both signed roughly a century later. The careful crafting signals the evolution of treaty making in a new country, but it can't conceal the colonial intent.
They're really only showing a partial story, or we're not really seeing any of the Indigenous perspectives of that documented record.
The prevailing attitude at the time was that Indigenous people were going to disappear and assimilate into mainstream culture.
So what does reconciliation look like in here, the Canadian government's official memory? That's a key question for a department that hasn't escaped criticism amid calls for all sectors of society to contribute. It's more than a little ironic for Claudette Commanda to learn where the treaties live.
In these steel drawers.
Yeah. Her people, the Algonquin Nation, never signed a treaty, meaning the land that both Gatineau and Ottawa occupy was never surrendered by First Nations. Just one of many hard truths she says the country isn't ready to hear.
There are many deniers out there that feel that the treaties mean nothing, that the land was meant to be taken. So are they ready? Is Canada ready for the truth? No.
And while reconciliation may be messy, she says this solution is simple.
The government should be working with First Nations, with Treaty Nations, to ensure that the First Nations, they have the ownership, the control, and the management of the treaties that belong to them.
Is that what reconciliation would look like in this case?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
A conversation for another day, perhaps. But for now, it's back to the vault.
Well, still ahead on the heels of new revelations in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder, some Sikhs are calling for increased security measures for the community in Canada. We'll take you to a meeting in Surrey after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. A group of Sikh community leaders and policy advisors gathered in Surrey today to address what they're calling the rising threat of Indian foreign interference in Canada. This meeting was prompted by the assassination of a prominent Sikh activist in June. As Janella Hamilton reports, they're urging the federal government to take security threats seriously and are setting a list of calls to action now to the Prime Minister.
Today's meeting is based on recent confirmation from Canadian authorities about India's involvement in the assassination of Shaheed by Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Tensions and anxiety running high during this community meeting at the same Surrey temple where pro-Khalistan activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar was gunned down just months ago. Navjot Singh worries wearing a turban could make him a target too.
This is so disturbing for us. So this should be not done in these countries. Like we know this all happens in India, Punjab, but even now in these countries we don't feel safe now.
Singh was among a large crowd of people from BC's Sikh community demanding greater protection for Canadians.
People used to come here for their safety as a refugee and stuff, right? And these days we are not safe anywhere in the world.
On June 18th, Nijjar, a Canadian citizen, was shot dead at the edge of the property. The federal government is accusing India of involvement
in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty.
To have the Prime Minister acknowledge in Parliament that Indian agents had a role in the assassination of a Canadian citizen on foreign soil for his political beliefs and advocacy is definitely something unprecedented and I think rare.
The Indian government has denied any involvement in Nijjar's death. Just this week, another activist from the same Gurdwara told CBC he was warned by law enforcement about threats to his life as well through a duty to warn document that he says was delivered to his home by RCMP a month ago. Concerns culminating with a high-profile meeting between Sikh community leaders and policy advisors from across North America. Out of it, they're compiling a list of actions they want the government to take. That letter, they say, will be sent to the Prime Minister's office within the next 24 hours. At the forefront, an independent public inquiry.
And in terms of the assassination, what did Canadian agencies and security forces know in Canada? Where does the fault or responsibility lie with Canadian agencies and policymakers?
Among the other demands, the creation of a foreign agent registry and the immediate expulsion of India's High Commissioner to Canada. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Surrey.
And here's a look at Science World and BC Place. They were lit up orange today to recognize the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Weather-wise, cooler temperatures, clearer skies will mark the rest of the long weekend. I'll have your 5-day forecast coming up next.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. CBC Vancouver is the exclusive media partner of the Jade Music Festival, October 18th to the 20th. The festival features a variety of events that showcase Chinese-Canadian music and entertainment. And on October 21st, support youth arts education with Gloria Makarenko at Splash, Arts Umbrella's 41st annual gala and art auction. Tickets at artsumbrella.com.
And let's take a look at our 5-day forecast. We'll start with that satellite radar. You can see not much to speak of. That's because we had those bright blue clear skies, a lovely fall September day here in the lower mainland, and that brought us that high pressure system that's stretching over a lot of the region through tomorrow as well. Monday is when we could see some showers. Here's the forecast for tomorrow, though. It looks pretty sunny for the southern half of the province at least. Temperatures right around seasonal, right where we should be. And the rain is where we'll see in Prince George, perhaps Williams Lake, and further on the north coast as well. Some showers that will continue and persist through Monday. And here's how it looks. We will see that on the south coast as well, but not until later on Monday into Tuesday. So we'll see that rainfall kind of sweep across Vancouver Island, parts of the lower mainland. That will gradually move eastward as well into parts of the interior, but otherwise kind of a mixed bag. Monday, the showers, otherwise cloudy, but breaks of sunshine. And again, 16 degrees is our average high for this time of year. Still hanging on to those double digits too for our overnight lows. And that is your late news for this Saturday, September 30th. Thank you so much for joining us, and we leave you now with images from across the country on this National Truth and Reconciliation Day.